Preston Carter walked into the most exclusive diamond gala in New York City with his 26-year-old mistress on his arm and a smirk that could light a room on fire. He left his pregnant wife at home, called her a whale, told her to dust the library and not wait up. He had no idea that the $5,000 invitation in his pocket was not luck. It was a trap. He had no idea that every dollar in his bank account, every deal he ever closed, every suit on his back came from one person. The woman he left, crying over a cold Thanksgiving dinner. The woman he never once touched on the belly while she carried his daughter. The woman he told she was nothing. Because here is what Preston did not know. His quiet, invisible, broken little housewife. She owned the hotel he just walked into. She owned the bank holding his mortgage. She owned his entire company through 12 shell corporations. And tonight, in front of 500 of the most powerful people in America, she was about to step out of the shadows in a $12 million sapphire necklace and burn his kingdom to the ground. But this is not just a revenge story, because what happened after the gala? That is where the real nightmare begins. The public turned against her. His lawyer came for her baby, and at 3 a.m, he showed up at her door. This story will change the way you see silence, strength, and survival. Because the most dangerous woman in the room is never the one who is screaming. It is the one who has been quiet for 5 years and just stopped pretending. Lesson and meaning. Before we begin, here is what this story is really about. It is not about money. It is not about revenge. It is about a woman who was told she was worthless every single day for 5 years and chose to believe it until the day she chose not to. If you have ever stayed too long with someone who made you feel invisible, if you have ever been afraid to leave because you thought you had nothing, this story is for you. Your silence is not weakness. Your patience is not stupidity. And your comeback does not need $1 billion. It just needs one decision. Preston Carter walked into the Diamond Gala with a woman on his arm who was not his wife and a smirk on his face that could have powered the chandelier above him. He adjusted his tuxedo, a Brioni custom cut that cost more than most people's annual rent, and whispered to the blonde clinging to his elbow, "This is where legends are made, babe. Stick close, act expensive." Tiffany Blake, 26 years old and dressed in a red Versace knockoff, so tight it looked like it had been painted on with a roller, let out a squeal that made 3 nearby socialites wince simultaneously. "Oh my God, Preston, is that the mayor?" Preston Carter believed he was untouchable that night. He believed he had clawed his way from nothing to the top of the food chain through sheer genius and iron will. He believed the invitation in his pocket was proof that the universe had finally recognized his greatness. He was wrong about all of it. The invitation was not luck. It was a leash. And the woman he had left at home, 7 months pregnant and crying over a cold Thanksgiving dinner he never bothered to eat, she was not the broken, simple housewife he had spent 5 years convincing her she was. She owned the hotel he was standing in. She owned the bank that held his mortgage. She owned every single dollar in his venture capital firm, funneled through a maze of shell companies so elaborate it would take a team of forensic accountants 3 months to untangle it. And she had hired exactly that team. But before we get to the execution, you need to understand the crime, because what Preston Carter did to his pregnant wife was not just betrayal. It was not just cruelty. It was warfare waged against a woman whose only sin was wanting to be loved for who she was. And that woman? Her name was Vivian. And tonight, she was done pretending. To understand how Vivian Sinclair ended up scrubbing pots in a suburban colonial in Greenwich, Connecticut, while secretly running a multinational conglomerate from an encrypted phone hidden in the laundry room. You have to go back 6 years. Back to a diner in Dayton, Ohio, where a 28-year-old woman sat alone in a cracked vinyl booth, wearing her dead father's flannel shirt and staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold 2 hours ago. Her father, Henry Sinclair, had been buried the day before. To the people of Dayton, Henry was a mechanic. A good one. The kind of man who could diagnose an engine by sound alone and who never charged a widow full price for repair. He had grease under his fingernails and a laugh that could fill a room. And he raised Vivian alone after her mother died when Vivian was 12. What the people of Dayton did not know was that Henry Sinclair had also invented a fuel injection component in the late 1970s that revolutionized combustion engines. He patented it quietly. He licensed it broadly. And by the time he died of a heart attack at 61, that patent was embedded in roughly 60% of every combustion engine on the planet. Henry left Vivian a fortune. Not a small one. $4.3 billion, managed through a holding company called the Aurora Group, run by a man named Benedict Ashford, the CEO of the largest private bank in London. Vivian sat in that diner the day after the funeral, and her phone rang. It was her ex-fiancé's lawyer. The ex-fiancé who had stolen $2 million from her personal account and vanished to Costa Rica 6 months earlier when he discovered exactly how much she was worth. The lawyer's voice was slick and rehearsed. Miss Sinclair, my client feels it would be mutually embarrassing to pursue legal action. He suggests a quiet resolution. Vivian hung up without a word. She stared at a reflection in the diner window. Rain streaked the glass, distorting her face into something she did not recognize. She saw a woman who had been betrayed by the first man she ever trusted with her heart, whose father was gone, whose mother was a memory, and whose money had become a curse that turned every relationship into a transaction. She picked up her phone and called Benedict Ashford. "Benedict," she said, her voice steady despite the tears still drying on her cheeks. "I want to disappear, create a new background, move my operations entirely to remote management. Vivian Sinclair dies today." There was a long pause on the line. "And who is born in her place, madam?" "Nobody, just a regular woman, someone a man could love without a price tag." Later that night, she called her grandmother. Gloria Sinclair was 72 at the time, sharp as a tack and twice as pointed. She lived in the same house in Dayton, where she had raised Henry, and she was the only person on earth who knew the full scope of what Vivian was about to do. "Grandma," Vivian said, "I am going to find someone who loves me with nothing. I am going to live like a normal person and see if real love actually exists." Gloria was quiet for a moment. Then she said something Vivian would carry with her for the next 6 years, like a stone in her pocket. "Baby, if you want to test a man, do not watch how he treats you when you are shining. Watch how he treats you when you are struggling. That is the only test that matters." Vivian moved to Westport, Connecticut. She rented a small apartment above a bakery. She got a job waitressing at a restaurant she secretly owned through 3 layers of corporate holdings. She wore jeans from the clearance rack and drove a Honda Civic with a dent in the bumper, and she met Preston. He was charming. God, he was charming. He had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room, like whatever you were saying was the most fascinating thing he had ever heard. He opened doors. He pulled out chairs. He remembered that she liked her coffee with oat milk and 1 sugar, and he would have it waiting for her when she arrived at the coffee shop where they had their second and third and fourth dates. On their third date, they were walking past a grocery store when an elderly woman dropped 2 bags of groceries on the sidewalk. Cans rolled into the street. The woman looked like she might cry. Preston did not hesitate. He jogged over, scooped up every can, carried both bags to her car, and refused the $5 bill she tried to press into his hand. He came back to Vivian with a sheepish grin. Sorry about that. Could not just walk past, you know. That was the moment Vivian fell in love, not because of the gesture itself, but because of how effortless it seemed. Like kindness was his default setting. She would replay that moment 1,000 times over the next 5 years, trying to understand how the man who helped a stranger with her groceries became the man who told his pregnant wife she looked like a whale. They married after 18 months. Vivian told Preston she had a small inheritance from her father, enough for a down payment on a house. What she actually did was buy the house outright through a shell company and create a fake mortgage that Preston believed he was paying with the profits from his new venture capital firm, Carter Ventures. That was his baby, his proof that he was somebody. What Preston did not know was that every single investor, every client, every deal that came through his door was routed from the Aurora Group through a labyrinth of shell companies with names like Nebula, Holdings, and Orion Acquisitions. Vivian was his only investor, his only client, his only source of income. She did this not to trap him, but because she loved him and wanted him to feel successful. She wanted him to have confidence. She wanted the man she married to thrive. She just did not expect him to thrive by becoming a monster. The transformation did not happen overnight. It never does. Abuse is not an earthquake. It is erosion. It is water wearing away stones so slowly that by the time you notice the canyon, you cannot remember what the landscape looked like before. Year 1 was beautiful. Preston brought flowers every Friday. He cooked dinner on Sundays. He called her my girl and meant it, or at least it sounded like he meant it, which in the beginning felt like the same thing. He would wrap his arms around her from behind while she washed dishes and press his lips to her neck and whisper, "How did I get so lucky?" Year 2, the first crack appeared. They were getting ready for a dinner party, and Vivian came downstairs in a blue dress she had bought that afternoon. Preston looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted behind his eyes. "You are wearing that? It is a little plain, do you not think? Maybe something with more shape. You have been looking a little, I do not know, soft lately." She changed. She told herself it was not a big deal. Couples give each other feedback. That is normal. That is healthy. Year 3, the feedback became constant. He stopped saying, please. He stopped saying, thank you. The flowers stopped. The Sunday dinners stopped. He started referring to the house as my house and the car as my car, even though Vivian had paid for both. You do not contribute, Vivian. You waitress part-time and you putter around this house. I am the one building something. I am the one with the vision. You should be grateful I keep you around. Year 4, the cruelty calcified into something permanent. He would come home late, smelling like expensive perfume that was not hers. And when she asked where he had been, he would look at her with such withering contempt that she felt herself shrink. I was working, Vivian. Working. Something you would not understand because you have never built anything in your life. Now make me something to eat. I am starving. She knew she could end it at any time. She knew she could pick up the encrypted phone hidden in the laundry hamper, call Benedict, and have Preston removed from her life with the efficiency of a surgeon excising a tumor. She had the money. She had the lawyers. She had the power. But she also had hope. That stupid, stubborn, beautiful, destructive thing called hope. She kept waiting for the man from the coffee shop to come back, the man who helped the old woman with her groceries, the man who called her my girl. She kept giving him one more chance, and then one more, and then one more after that. Here is something nobody tells you about abusive relationships. The victim is not weak. Staying takes an incredible amount of strength, the wrong kind of strength, turned inward, crushing you slowly from the inside. The bravest thing Vivian Sinclair ever did was not building a billion-dollar empire from a diner booth in Ohio. It was waking up every single morning next to a man who made her feel invisible and choosing to keep going. Year 5, he hired Tiffany Blake. Tiffany was 26, blonde, ambitious. She had a degree in communications from a state school and a talent for telling powerful men exactly what they wanted to hear. Preston hired her as his executive assistant at Carter Ventures, and within 3 months, she was answering his personal phone, picking up his dry cleaning, and meeting him at the St. Regis Hotel every Tuesday afternoon while he told Vivian he was at board meetings. Vivian knew. Of course she knew. She had access to every financial record, every credit card statement, every GPS log from the car she leased through Aurora. She watched the hotel charges appear on the corporate card. She watched the jewelry purchases. She watched a $12,500 Cartier diamond pendant get listed in the company ledger as computer hardware server upgrade. She watched all of it, and she felt her heart break so slowly and so completely that by the time there was nothing left to break, she barely noticed the silence where love used to be. And then, in month 3 of the affair, Vivian discovered she was pregnant. She told Preston, over dinner, she had made his favorite meal. She set the table with candles. She put the ultrasound photo in a small envelope next to his plate. Preston opened the envelope. He looked at the photo. He looked at Vivian. And for one shining, desperate moment, she saw something flicker in his eyes that looked like the man she married. A baby, he said softly. A girl, Vivian whispered. We are having a daughter. Preston set the photo down. He picked up his fork. He took a bite of food, and then he said, without looking up, well, I hope she gets your looks, because my genes are wasted on someone who is just going to end up as a housewife anyway. He went upstairs after dinner. He did not mention the baby again for 3 weeks. But Vivian sat at that table long after the candles burned down, her hand on her stomach, and made a different kind of decision. She was not staying for Preston anymore. She was not hoping for Preston anymore. She was done with hope. She was planning. She picked up the encrypted phone. She called Benedict. The gala, she said. When is the Diamond Gala this year? December 14th, madam. The invitations were sent last week. Send one to Preston. Make sure it looks like it came from the event committee. VIP table, near the front. Benedict paused. And the board presentation? Move it to that night. I want the full forensic audit ready. Henderson, the legal team, everyone. Madam, Benedict said carefully, are you certain? Vivian looked down at the ultrasound photo still sitting on the table, next to Preston's half-eaten dinner and the candles that had melted into pools of wax. I am certain, she said. My daughter is not going to be born into a lie. The weeks before the gala were supposed to be a countdown to liberation. Instead, they became the worst weeks of Vivian's life. It started with Thanksgiving. Vivian was 6 months pregnant. She woke up at 5 in the morning and spent the entire day cooking. Turkey with sage stuffing, homemade cranberry sauce, green bean casserole, and sweet potato pie made from Preston's mother's recipe, the one he had told her about on their second date, the one he said reminded him of being a kid in New Jersey before his father left. She set the table with the good china. She lit candles. She put on the nicest maternity dress she owned, a soft green number that made her feel almost pretty, despite the weight of 7 months of pregnancy and 5 years of neglect. She even set out Preston's favorite bourbon with a single large ice cube, the way he liked it. Preston came home at 9:15 at night. The turkey was cold. The candles had burned halfway down. The ice cube had melted into a sad puddle of diluted whiskey. He walked into the dining room, looked at the spread, and wrinkled his nose. I already ate. The team had dinner at Nobu. You know I cannot eat this heavy stuff, Vivian. It is so pedestrian. Vivian's hands were trembling, but she kept her voice steady. I made your mother's sweet potato pie. You said it was your favorite. Preston loosened his tie with a sharp tug. That was before I developed a palate, Vivian. Throw it away, all of it, and clean this up. The house smells like a school cafeteria. He walked upstairs without looking at her belly, without asking about the baby, without saying, Happy Thanksgiving. Vivian sat down at the table. She picked up a fork. She ate her Thanksgiving dinner alone, tears falling into the sweet potato pie she had spent 3 hours making from memory because she wanted to give her husband something that tasted like home. Later that night, curled on the couch because she could not bear to lie next to him, she called Ruth Washington, her best friend since their freshman year at college. Ruth was a pediatric nurse in Bridgeport, the kind of woman who said exactly what she thought and did not apologize for the volume. Viv, leave him tonight. Pack a bag and come to my apartment. I will make up the guest room. I am 7 months pregnant, Ruth. I cannot just leave. You are a billionaire, Vivian. You can do literally anything. That is not the point. I wanted this to be real. I wanted him to love me, for me. If I reveal who I am now, I will never know. Know what? Ruth's voice cracked with frustration. He treats you like garbage. That is your answer. The test is over, Viv. He failed. Listen to me. When someone shows you who they are the first time, believe them. You have given him 5 years of second chances. That is not love, honey. That is a hostage situation. Vivian closed her eyes. Not yet. The gala is in 2 weeks. I have a plan. After the gala, it is over. I promise. Ruth was silent for a long time. Then quietly, Vivian Sinclair, I swear to God, if that man hurts you or that baby, I will burn his life down myself. And I do not need $1 billion to do it. 1 week before the gala, Vivian had her final prenatal appointment. She asked Preston to come. It was the last ultrasound before the baby was born. Their daughter. The child they had made together in a moment that Vivian still wanted to believe had meant something. I have a meeting, Preston said, not looking up from his phone. A real one, with actual important people. Vivian went alone. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Patterson, performed the ultrasound. The baby was healthy. Strong heartbeat, good position. Everything looked perfect on the screen, even if nothing was perfect anywhere else. Then Dr. Patterson frowned slightly. Mrs. Carter, I am noticing some elevated blood pressure. Have you been under unusual stress? Something broke in Vivian. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet crack. Like a branch giving way under too much snow. She started crying. She could not stop. The tears came in waves, and she sat on that exam table, in her paper gown, with the ultrasound gel still cold on her belly, and sobbed. Doctor. Patterson held her hand and waited. When the worst of it passed, she asked gently, Vivian, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Is everything okay at home? Vivian opened her mouth. She was so close to telling the truth. She could feel the words right there, pressing against her teeth. But 5 years of pretending had turned silence into muscle memory. I am fine, just hormones. She left the office and walked through the parking lot toward her beat-up Honda Civic. And that is when she saw it. Preston's silver Mercedes, parked across the street at the Cheesecake Factory. Through the window, under the warm light of the restaurant, she could see Preston sitting at a booth. Tiffany Blake was across from him, laughing at something he said. Preston reached across the table and fed her a bite of cheesecake from his fork. And then his hand moved down to Tiffany's stomach. He rubbed it gently, tenderly, the way a man touches a woman who is carrying his child. Tiffany was pregnant too. Vivian stood in the rain, 7 months pregnant, alone, watching her husband cradle another woman's belly in the same restaurant where he had proposed to her 3 years ago, down on one knee between the dessert case and the hostess stand, telling her she was the only woman he would ever want. He had never touched Vivian's belly. Not once in 7 months. She had asked him to feel the baby kick. He said he was busy. She had placed his hand on her stomach while he was half asleep. He pulled it away and rolled over. But there he was, rubbing Tiffany Blake's stomach like it contained the second coming. Vivian called Gloria. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Grandma, she is pregnant. Tiffany is pregnant." There was a silence so thick, Vivian could hear the clock ticking on Gloria's kitchen wall 1,000 miles away. Lord have mercy. How far along? 3 months, maybe. He was rubbing her belly. "Grandma, he has never once touched mine. Not once." Gloria's voice, when it came, was made of iron wrapped in velvet. "Vivian Marie Sinclair, you listen to me. You are going to that gala. You are going to burn his castle to the ground, and then you are coming home to me, and we are going to raise that grandbaby of mine with so much love, she will never know what it feels like to be cold. Do you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "And baby, wear the blue dress, the one with the diamonds. Let him see what a real queen looks like." The night before the gala, Preston came home drunk at midnight. Vivian was in bed, propped up on pillows, because sleeping on her back had become impossible. She was reading a baby name book. She had circled Eleanor. Preston stood in the doorway and looked at her. The disgust on his face was so naked, so unfiltered, that Vivian flinched as if he had raised his hand. "God, Vivian, you look like a whale. I cannot even look at you anymore. I am carrying your daughter, Preston. Are you sure it is mine? Let us be honest, Vivian. I have not touched you in months. Who knows what you do when I am working?" The accusation was so cruel, so perfectly inverted, that it took her breath away. The man who spent every Tuesday with his mistress was accusing his faithful pregnant wife of cheating. Then he sat on the edge of the bed, loosening his shoes, and said it. The thing she had been dreading. "After the baby is born, we need to talk about the future. I have been thinking. I want a different life. The company is going through changes. I might need to restructure things at home too." He was telling her he was going to leave her. After the baby. After she had served her purpose as an incubator. "Where would I go, Preston?" Vivian asked, keeping her voice small. "I have nothing. You control everything," Preston smirked. His teeth gleamed in the dark. "Exactly. So maybe try being a little more grateful." He fell asleep in 4 minutes. Vivian lay awake until dawn, her hand on her belly, feeling her daughter kick against her palm. She whispered into the darkness, "Tomorrow, sweetheart. Tomorrow, Mommy stops pretending." The morning of the gala, Vivian woke at 6 to 3 phone calls. That nearly destroyed everything. The first came from Benedict. "Madam, we have a problem. A board member, I will not name him yet until security confirms, has leaked information to a financial journalist at the Wall Street Journal. They know the Aurora Group owner will be revealed tonight. If the story breaks before you control the narrative, Preston could see it, panic, and flee the country or destroy evidence." The second call came from Ruth. "Viv, I just ran into Tiffany Blake at the nail salon on Main Street. She was loud. She was bragging to two friends. She said Preston is filing for divorce Monday morning. His lawyer told him, "You get nothing because you have no income. They think you are destitute, Viv. They are going to try to take the house." The third call came from Vivian's attorney. "Mrs. Carter, I need to inform you that a $500,000 home equity loan was taken out against your Greenwich residence yesterday. The signature on the application is yours, but we have confirmed through handwriting analysis that it is a forgery. Your husband forged your signature to secure funds. Our sources indicate the money was used as a down payment on a condominium in Stamford. The deed is in Tiffany Blake's name. 3 catastrophes in 45 minutes. The media leak threatened her carefully orchestrated reveal. The divorce filing meant Preston's lawyer was already building a case to strip her of assets they did not know she had. And the forged signature was a federal crime that, if discovered through normal channels, could unravel her cover before she was ready. Vivian sat on the edge of the bed. Preston was in the shower, singing, actually singing, some pop song about living your best life. She could hear him through the bathroom door, happy and confident, preparing for his big night at the gala, completely unaware that the woman sitting 15 feet away from him owned the water he was showering in. She called Benedict back. "Kill the leak. I do not care how. Pay the journalist for an exclusive post-gala interview, whatever it takes. But that story does not run until I am on that stage." "Done," Benedict replied. "And the forged signature? Add it to Henderson's file. Page 4. She hung up and called Ruth. "I need you tonight, not just as my friend. I need you in that room. Back table, near the door. If things go sideways, I need someone I trust who is not on my payroll." Ruth did not hesitate. "I will be there. And Viv, whatever happens tonight, I am proud of you." Preston emerged from the bathroom in a cloud of steam and expensive cologne. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tuxedo, practicing his smile, tilting his head to find his best angle. He did not look at Vivian. "Vivian," he said, still admiring himself, "where are my onyx cufflinks? The good ones, on the dresser, right where you left them." He grabbed the cufflinks and snapped them on. He checked his Rolex, the one Vivian had bought him for their 5th anniversary, the one he told everyone he purchased with his Christmas bonus. "I will be late tonight. Do not wait up. And make sure the cleaning lady actually dusts the library this time. I found a fingerprint on my desk." He grabbed his coat and walked out without saying goodbye, without looking at her, without touching the belly that held his daughter. The door slammed. The picture frames on the wall rattled. Silence filled the house, like water filling a sinking ship. Vivian stood up. She untied her apron and let it fall to the floor. She pulled the hair tie from her bun and let her dark hair cascade over her shoulders. She walked to the locked room at the end of the hall. The one Preston thought was storage. She keyed in the code. The door clicked open. Inside was not storage. It was a command center. 3 monitors showing real-time financial data. A secure communication terminal. A wall of files organized by date and category. And in the center of the room, hanging from a padded hanger under a garment bag, was the dress. Midnight blue silk, hand-stitched with crushed diamonds that caught the dim light and threw it back like captured stars. It had been designed to accommodate her pregnant figure, flowing around her body like water, making her look not heavy, but powerful, like a storm, like something elemental and unstoppable. Beside the dress sat a jewelry case. Inside was the Sinclair blue, a sapphire and diamond necklace that had been in her family for 3 generations. It was worth $12 million. Her father had kept it in a safety deposit box in Dayton. He told Vivian once, "You will know when to wear it. Wear it when you are done being small." She touched the sapphire. It was cold against her fingers. I am done being small, she said to no one. Her phone buzzed. A text from Gloria with a photo. Gloria was in her kitchen in Ohio, holding up a cast iron skillet and grinning. The text read, "Just in case the boy shows up unannounced, Grandma is armed and ready." For the first time in weeks, Vivian laughed. Ruth arrived at 4 in the afternoon with a garment bag, a professional makeup kit she had borrowed from a friend who did theater, and 2 bottles of sparkling cider. "I would have brought champagne," Ruth said. "But you are pregnant and I am driving, so cider it is. We will toast to the destruction of your husband like civilized women." She helped Vivian with her hair, pinning it up in an elegant sweep that exposed her neck for the Sinclair blue. When Vivian opened the jewelry case, Ruth went completely still. "Girl, is that real? It is called the Sinclair blue. It has been in my family since 1942. Ruth stared at the diamonds. "I have been lending you $20 for lunch. $20, Vivian. For 5 years. You owe me 5 years of emotional damages and a vacation home." Vivian laughed again. A real laugh. Something warm and human that had been locked away so long it felt like a stranger in her chest. "But seriously," Ruth continued, "can I hold it? Just for a second. I want to know what being rich feels like." Vivian handed her the necklace. Ruth held it up, closed her eyes, stood very still for 3 seconds, then opened her eyes and shook her head. "Nope. Still got student loans. Does not work." Vivian video, called Gloria. She turned in front of the camera so her grandmother could see the full effect. The midnight blue gown flowing over her pregnant figure, the diamonds catching light, the sapphire blazing at her throat. Gloria was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was thick. "Oh, baby girl, your daddy would cry if he could see you right now." "I am scared, Grandma." "Good. Brave people are always scared. Cowards are the ones who feel nothing. Now you put on those diamonds and go show that man what he threw away, and call me the second it is done. I do not care what time it is. This old woman is not sleeping tonight." While Vivian prepared for war, Preston was already at the Archdale Hotel in Manhattan, waging his own campaign of self-destruction. He arrived at 6:30 with Tiffany on his arm. She was wearing the red dress, the Versace knockoff charged to the Carter Ventures corporate card. Her Cartier necklace, the one bought with orphan food money and listed as a server upgrade, sparkled against her collarbone. Preston swaggered through the entrance like he owned the place. The security guard, a towering man with an earpiece, checked his name on the tablet and paused. A strange look crossed his face, something that might have been pity. "Right this way, Mr. Carter. You have a table near the front." Preston grinned at Tiffany. "See? Near the front. That is power, babe." Inside, the ballroom was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the gold-leafed ceiling. Waiters in white gloves moved like silent phantoms. The city's elite circulated in clusters, their laughter soft, their jewelry loud. Preston scanned the room with the desperation of a man who needed to be seen. He spotted Grant Holloway, a rival investor who had outmaneuvered him on a tech deal 3 months prior. Grant was speaking with a group of older men in impeccable suits. Grant. "Good to see you," Preston said, inserting himself into the circle with the subtlety of a car alarm. Grant turned, his eyes narrowing as he took in Preston and the flashing red beacon that was Tiffany. "Preston, did not think you made the cut for this list. It is invite only." "I have my connections," Preston lied smoothly. "This is Tiffany." "Charmed," Grant said dryly, barely glancing at her. "We were just discussing the Aurora Group. Word is the owner is finally making an appearance tonight." Preston laughed. "The Aurora Group? Please. It is probably some old man in a wheelchair hiding in Switzerland." I heard the whole thing is a shell for money laundering. A silver-haired man in the group turned slowly toward Preston. His name was Lord Rothschild, one of the 5 wealthiest men in Europe. And he looked at Preston the way a homeowner looks at a cockroach on the kitchen counter. I would be careful with your speculations, young man. The Aurora Group owns this hotel, and the bank that holds your mortgage, likely. Preston waved a dismissive hand. I know finance, sir. I know when a company is a ghost. Aurora has no face. That means they have no power. Grant smirked into his champagne glass. If you say so, Preston. By the way, where's your wife tonight? Vivian, was it? Preston rolled his eyes. Vivian? She is at home. She is not really cut out for this world. Sweet girl, but very simple. She thinks a grocery store wine is fine dining. You know how it is. Tiffany giggled. She sounds adorable, like a little mouse. Exactly, Preston agreed, taking a glass of champagne from a passing tray. A mouse. I need a lioness. He squeezed Tiffany's waist and laughed at his own joke, completely unaware that the mouse he left at home was about to walk through those doors and eat him alive. At precisely 8 o'clock, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The murmur of 500 conversations died like a candle being snuffed. A single spotlight hit the grand staircase at the far end of the room, illuminating the marble steps like a runway to heaven or to hell, depending on where you were sitting. The master of ceremonies stepped to the microphone. He was a well-known actor with a voice like aged bourbon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the 50th annual Diamond Gala. Tonight is a historic occasion. For decades, the Aurora Group has funded hospitals, charities, and the arts from the shadows. Tonight, the chairwoman has decided to step into the light. Preston nudged Tiffany. Watch. It is going to be some old lady. Bet you $10. Please welcome, the announcer continued, the owner and chairwoman of the Aurora Group, Madame Vivian Sinclair. The champagne glass slipped from Preston's fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was swallowed by the collective gasp that moved through the room like a wave. Sinclair. That was Vivian's maiden name, but that was impossible. Her father was a mechanic. Preston had met him before he died. He had seen the grease under his fingernails. He had eaten the man's barbecue. The double doors at the top of the staircase swung open, and there she was. Vivian stood at the top of the stairs in a gown of midnight blue silk that cascaded over her pregnant figure like a waterfall made of twilight. Crushed diamonds caught the spotlight and threw it back in 1,000 directions, making her shimmer like something not entirely human. The Sinclair blue sapphire blazed at her throat, $12 million of crystallized power. Her dark hair was swept up, exposing the elegant column of her neck. She was 7 months pregnant, and she was the most commanding person in the room. She began to descend. Every click of her heels on the marble was measured, deliberate. She moved like a woman who owned the ground she walked on, which, as it happened, she literally did. The crowd parted. 500 of the wealthiest, most powerful people in New York City stepped aside like the Red Sea, and Vivian walked through them without looking left or right. Her eyes were fixed on one person. Preston. He stood paralyzed at his table, his mouth open, his face cycling through emotions so fast it looked like a slot machine trying to land on something coherent. Confusion, shock, recognition, fear. Tiffany tugged his sleeve. Why does that lady look like your wife? Only like a goddess version. Grant Holloway, standing close enough to hear, allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. I think, Preston, that is the mouse you left at home. Vivian reached the bottom of the stairs. She stopped 10 feet from Preston. 4 security guards flanked her. Benedict Ashford stood at her right side, immaculate in a charcoal suit. Marcus Henderson, the forensic accountant, stood at the left, holding a leather folio like a death warrant. Vivian looked at Preston. A slow, terrifying smile spread across her face. Not warm, not forgiving. It was the smile of a woman who had been underestimated for the last time. She was handed a microphone. Her voice rang out across the ballroom, clear and commanding. "Welcome. I apologize for my lateness. I had some garbage to take out before I could attend." Her eyes never left Preston's face. She turned to Lord Rothschild. "Lord Rothschild, I apologize for the confusion with the Shanghai acquisition. Benedict assures me the paperwork is in order." The old man bowed. "Think nothing of it, Madam Sinclair. Your vision for the Asian market is unparalleled. We are merely following your lead." Preston watched one of the richest men in Europe bow to his housewife, and something inside him began to crack. Vivian returned to the podium. Her expression was calm, but her hands were trembling slightly, where only Ruth, watching from the back of the room, could see. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vivian said, "for the past 5 years, I have been conducting what you might call a social experiment. I wanted to know if a man could love a woman for who she was, not what she owned. So, I hid my identity. I became a simple housewife. I let my husband take the lead." She pressed a button. The massive screen behind her flickered to life. It displayed a corporate flowchart. At the top, the Aurora Group. Below it, a web of shell companies. At the very bottom, feeding off the scraps like a barnacle on a ship, was Carter Ventures. My husband, Preston, believed he was a self-made venture capitalist. In reality, every single dollar in his firm came from me. Funneled through these entities, I am his only investor, his only client, his only source of income. Preston stood up. "That is a lie. I closed the Tokyo deal last month. $2 million. Real money. Real investors." Vivian pressed the button again. A bank statement appeared. "The Tokyo deal. Funded by Orion Acquisitions, my company. You were negotiating with my lawyers, Preston. I hired actors to sit in the room because you were too busy showing off your watch to notice they did not speak English." The screen cycled. Hotel bills from the St. Regis. Every Tuesday afternoon. The Cartier necklace listed as computer hardware. A photo of Preston and Tiffany at Disney World wearing Mickey Mouse ears, filed as a business trip to the Chicago Board of Trade. She paused on the Disney photo. The room erupted in laughter. It was not kind laughter. It was the sound of a social class executing one of its own. Henderson stepped forward with the forged loan documents. "And this," Henderson announced, "is a home equity loan for $500,000, taken out yesterday against the marital residence using a forged signature. The funds were used to purchase a condominium in Stamford, Connecticut, currently deeded to Miss Tiffany Blake." Henderson turned to Tiffany. "That necklace you are wearing, Miss Blake, it was purchased with a corporate card registered to a nonprofit subsidiary dedicated to feeding orphans in Sudan. You are technically wearing the food budget for an entire village around your neck." Tiffany's hands flew to the Cartier pendant. She clawed at the clasp, tearing it off. "Get it off me! Get it off! He told me he was rich. He told me he was self-made." "He is self-made," Vivian said. "He made himself into a criminal." The final reveal. Henderson held up a yellowed birth certificate. "Ladies and gentlemen, the man we have been calling Preston Carter was born Preston Allen Mallory in Trenton, New Jersey. He changed his name 4 years ago. Before that, he was a junior shift manager at a rental car agency who was terminated for renting vehicles to himself on weekends. The humiliation was total. The man in the borrowed suit, with the borrowed name and the borrowed life, had nothing left to hide behind. FBI agents entered through the side doors. "Preston Allen Mallory," the lead agent announced, "you are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, aggravated identity theft, and embezzlement. As they cuffed him, Preston screamed across the room. "I loved you, oh Vivian. In my own way, I loved you." Vivian did not scream back. She simply reached up to unclasp the Sinclair blue from her neck. She held it up, the sapphire blazing under the chandeliers. "You did not love me, Preston. You loved I loved the reflection of yourself you saw in my money. But the mirror is broken now." The agents dragged him through the double doors. The heavy wood slammed shut, cutting off his protests. The ballroom erupted in applause. Vivian raised her glass of water. "To the future. May it be honest, may it be bright, and may it be ours." For 48 hours, Vivian Sinclair was the most celebrated woman in America. The gala footage went viral within the hour. Every major news network ran the story. Billionaire wife exposes fraudster husband at Diamond Gala. The clips of Preston's face as he realized his entire life was a puppet show accumulated 200 million views across platforms in 2 days. The photo of him in Mickey Mouse ears became a meme. People made T-shirts. Someone auto-tuned Henderson's forensic presentation into a rap song that hit the top of the comedy charts. Vivian was home in Greenwich, sitting on the couch with her feet up, an ice pack on her swollen ankles, watching the coverage, with Ruth beside her. For the first time in 5 years, the house felt quiet in a good way, not the silence of suppression, but the silence of peace. Ruth handed her a cup of herbal tea. "You did it, Viv. It is over. You actually did it." Vivian rubbed her belly. The baby was kicking, strong and steady, as if applauding from the inside. "Yeah, I guess I did." Then Ruth's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Her smile vanished. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. "Viv, you need to see this." It was a video, posted on social media from the county jail. Tiffany Blake, mascara streaked, in an orange jumpsuit, filmed by her cellmate holding a smuggled phone. She was crying. Real tears, or performed ones, it did not matter. The effect was devastating. "She ruined my Lola," Tiffany sobbed into the camera. "I am pregnant and alone. Preston told me she was abusive. He told me they were separated. He showed me divorce papers. And now I am in jail because a billionaire wanted revenge." She is not a hero. She is a rich woman who played God with real people's lives for 5 years. She could have left any time. She chose to watch us suffer so she could have her movie moment. What about my baby? Does my baby not matter? The video had 14 million views in 6 hours. The narrative flipped overnight. Suddenly, the woman who had been a hero was a villain. The headlines shifted with the speed and cruelty that only the internet can deliver. Billionaire revenge or billionaire bully? Pregnant mistress claims she is the real victim. Did Vivian Sinclair go too far? Talk show panels dissected her motives. She is worth $4 billion. She funded his entire fake career. Is not she the real manipulator here? A prominent columnist wrote a piece titled "The Problem with Billionaire Justice" that argued Vivian had treated human beings like chess pieces for her own amusement. The comments were relentless. She could have just divorced him quietly. Instead, she destroyed him in front of 500 people. That is not justice. That is a power trip. And the one that cut the deepest. What kind of mother turns her pregnancy into a prop for a public humiliation show? Vivian sat on her bed, scrolling through the comments, her hand on her belly, watching the world she thought she had finally set right crumble around her for the second time. Ruth took the phone from her hands. "Viv, stop. These people do not know you. They do not know what he did to you." "But they are right, Ruth." Vivian's voice was small, smaller than it had been even when Preston was berating her. I did set him up. I could have left 5 years ago. What kind of person stays just to build a trap? The kind of person who was in love and kept hoping he would change. That is not a crime, Vivian. That is being human, Gloria called from Ohio. Her voice cut through the noise like a church bell. Baby girl, since when do we care what strangers on the internet think? You know who you are. God knows who you are. And that baby knows who you are. Everyone else can kick rocks. Then she said something Vivian needed to hear more than anything. Let me tell you something I learned the hard way. When you fight a monster, everybody cheers. But the second you win, they start asking if you fought too hard. Do not you dare apologize for surviving. Women have been apologizing for being strong since the beginning of time. It stops with you. Vivian wiped her eyes. Okay, Grandma. But the public backlash was not the real threat. That came 30 minutes later when Benedict called with the voice he reserved for genuine emergencies. Madam, I need you to sit down. Preston's new attorney, a man named Harlan Drake, has filed 3 emergency motions. First, a claim of entrapment. He is arguing you deliberately funded Preston's criminal activity to trap him, which could constitute conspiracy. Second, a custody petition. Preston is seeking full custody of your unborn daughter, claiming you are psychologically unstable and used your pregnancy as a prop in a public spectacle. Third, a countersuit for $50 million, alleging you engaged in fraudulent inducement of marriage by concealing your identity. Vivian's blood went cold. He wants custody of Eleanor? A family court judge has granted a temporary hearing for next week. If Drake can prove you orchestrated the criminal activity, the federal charges could be reduced. And more importantly, he could establish a basis for the custody claim. The room tilted. Vivian gripped the edge of the bed. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her mother's distress. He cannot take my daughter, Benedict. He cannot. He will not, Benedict said firmly. But we need to prepare. This is no longer about revenge, madam. This is about survival. Vivian spent 3 days in what Ruth would later call the dark place. She did not eat properly. She did not sleep. She sat in the nursery she had been secretly decorating for months. The one with pale yellow walls and a white crib and a stuffed elephant she had bought on a whim at a farmer's market, because it reminded her of one her father had given her as a child. She rocked in the chair and held her belly and talked to her daughter. I was supposed to protect you. I was supposed to be smarter than this. And now he might take you away from me because I was too proud to just walk away. I am so sorry, baby. I am so sorry. Ruth found her there on the 3rd morning. She sat down on the floor, leaned against the crib, and said nothing for a long time. Then, stop. Vivian looked at her. Stop right now, Ruth said. You are not losing this baby. Over my dead body, over Gloria's dead body, over Benedict Ashford's extremely proper British dead body. It is not happening. So stop mourning something that has not happened and start fighting. What do we actually have? Vivian stared at her friend. Then something shifted in her eyes. Not the cold calculation of the Gala. Something warmer, more desperate. The ferocity of a mother. She picked up the encrypted phone. She called Benedict. Emergency meeting. Full team. 1 hour. The team assembled via secure video. Benedict from London. Henderson from his gray office in Midtown. Vivian's legal team from their conference room. And Detective Sarah Crawford from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, who had been working Vivian's case for 18 months. The entrapment claim, Vivian said, her voice steady now. It falls apart if we can prove I was cooperating with law enforcement the entire time. Benedict, I need the email chain with the FBI pulled and filed with the court. Every communication, every report, Every timestamp. Benedict nodded. Already in process, madam. We have 147 documented exchanges with the Bureau dating back 18 months. You were not enabling criminal activity. You were building a federal case under the supervision of law enforcement. Detective Crawford spoke up. I can confirm that in court. Mrs. Carter, or rather, Mrs. Sinclair, was a cooperating witness. She approached us a year and a half ago with evidence of financial irregularities in her husband's firm. We directed her to continue monitoring while we built the case. Everything she did was within the scope of our investigation. The custody claim, Vivian continued. What do we need? A character witness, her lawyer said. Someone who can testify to your fitness as a mother in the context of why you concealed your identity. Someone the judge will trust implicitly. Vivian thought for a moment. Then she smiled for the first time in 3 days. Get my grandmother on a plane. The hearing took place the following Thursday in a family court in Stamford, Connecticut. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the hallway. Preston appeared via video from the correctional facility, wearing his khaki jumpsuit, his lawyer Harlan Drake doing the talking. Drake was good. Vivian had to give him that. He was a silver-haired bulldog who spoke in measured, reasonable tones that made unreasonable arguments sound almost logical. Your Honor, Drake said, even if we accept that Mrs. Carter cooperated with law enforcement, the fundamental fact remains. She maintained a false identity for the entire duration of her marriage. She deliberately deceived her husband about who she was. That constitutes a profound psychological manipulation. A woman who would manipulate a man so completely for 5 years is not a fit custodial parent. Vivian's attorney, a woman named Patricia Webb, stood up. Your Honor, we would like to call a character witness. Gloria Sinclair, the petitioner's grandmother. Gloria walked into that courtroom like she owned it. She was 78 years old, moving slowly with a walking cane, wearing a floral dress and her Sunday church hat. She looked like the grandmother in a Norman Rockwell painting. She looked like the grandmother every person in that courtroom wished they had. She took the oath and settled into the witness chair with the comfort of a woman who had faced far worse things than a court of law. Drake approached her. Mrs. Sinclair, is it not true that your granddaughter deliberately deceived her husband about her financial status for the entire duration of their marriage? Gloria looked at him the way she might look at a child who had tracked mud on her clean floor. Young man, my granddaughter watched her first fiancé steal $2 million and disappear to Costa Rica. She watched every man she dated turn into a gold digger the second they smelled money. One of them stole from her. Another leaked her private information to a tabloid. A third proposed after 2 weeks and asked for a joint bank account before the ring was even sized. Gloria leaned forward. So yes, she hid who she was, because she wanted one man, just one, to love the woman instead of the wallet. That is not deception, counselor. That is self-preservation. And if you cannot tell the difference, I feel sorry for your wife. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge, a middle-aged woman named Judge Harrison, pressed her lips together in what was definitely not a smile, because judges do not smile at witness testimony. Drake pressed on. But the duration, Mrs. Sinclair, 5 years of deception. Gloria tilted her head. 5 years of cooking that man's meals. 5 years of washing his clothes. 5 years of being called stupid and ugly, and a wail while carrying his child. 5 years of watching him spend her money on another woman. And you want to talk to me about deception? My granddaughter is not the deceiver in this marriage, counselor. She is the one who got deceived about who she married. Judge Harrison made her ruling in 40 minutes. The custody petition is denied. There is no evidence before this court that Mrs. Sinclair Carter is an unfit parent. The countersuit is dismissed with prejudice. The entrapment claim has no merit given the documented cooperation with federal law enforcement. Additionally, the court notes that the respondent, Mr. Mallory, is currently facing federal charges that include forging his wife's signature on a loan application. The court finds his claims of victimhood difficult to credit. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Vivian hugged Ruth so hard they both nearly fell over. Gloria patted her hip and said, "Now can we go get lunch? Justice makes me hungry." The night after the hearing, Vivian slept for 12 hours straight. It was the deepest sleep she had gotten in months. She dreamed about her father. He was in his workshop, bent over an engine, and he looked up at her and smiled. "You did good, Vivi. Now go rest." She woke up feeling lighter than she had in 5 years. The custody threat was gone. The federal case against Preston was airtight. The public narrative was shifting again as more details of his abuse emerged. Ruth was staying over. Gloria had arrived from Ohio and was installed in the guest room, her cast-iron skillet within arm's reach, because, as she said, you never know with these things. By 10 at night, the house was quiet. Ruth was asleep in the guest room down the hall. Gloria was snoring softly across the way. Vivian was in bed, hand on her belly, reading a book about newborn sleep schedules, which struck her as optimistic given that she had not slept properly since the Clinton administration. At 3 in the morning, a sound woke her. It was subtle. A door closing, the soft scuff of shoes on hardwood, the specific creak of the third step on the staircase, the one she had been meaning to fix for 2 years. Someone was in the house. Vivian's hand moved instinctively to her phone on the nightstand. Her other hand went to her belly. The baby shifted, then went still, as if listening. She dialed security. The call connected, but did not ring. The line was dead. Cut. Whoever was in the house had disabled the phone line. She opened the encrypted phone. She texted Ruth. "Someone is downstairs. Call 911. Do not come down." Then she heard his voice. "Vivian." It was Preston. She would have recognized that voice in a hurricane, but it sounded different. Not smooth, not calculated. Raw, ragged, unhinged. She heard him moving through the downstairs. The living room, the kitchen, then his footsteps stopped. She heard the beep of the keypad on the secret room. Wrong code again. Then the sound of something heavy hitting the door. A shoulder thrown against it with the full weight of a desperate man. The door broke open. Vivian heard him inside the room. She heard him see the monitors, the files, the evidence wall. She heard a sound that was half laugh, half sob, then his footsteps on the stairs, slow, heavy, coming up. He appeared in the bedroom doorway. He was wild-eyed. His hair was matted. He smelled like bourbon. He was wearing a wrinkled dress shirt and jeans, the same clothes he must have had on when they released him on bail. His lawyer had pulled strings. 5 years, Preston said, his voice shaking. 5 years you watched me like a rat in a maze. You knew everything, every meeting, every trip, every lie. You sat there in your little apron, and you watched. Preston, you need to leave. You are violating your bail conditions. The police are already coming. You made me into this. His fists were clenched at his sides. I was a good man before you. You made me a monster. You dangled money in front of me and then punished me for taking it. This is your fault, Vivian. All of it. He took a step into the room. Vivian backed against the headboard. Her hand was on her belly. Eleanor kicked hard, as if trying to push away from the danger. I am giving you one chance, Preston. Walk out that door. Go back to your lawyer. This does not have to get worse. Worse? Preston laughed. A broken, ugly sound. How does it get worse? You took my name. You took my company. You took my freedom. You turned me into a joke in front of the entire world. What is left? From the hallway came a voice, sharp, calm, absolutely fearless, your dignity, boy, but you lost that a long time ago. Gloria Sinclair stood in the doorway, 78 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, wearing a bathrobe with pink flowers on it. In her right hand was a 12-inch cast-iron skillet, held at shoulder height with the confidence of a woman who had been swinging heavy cookware since before Preston was born. I am 78 years old, Gloria said, stepping into the room. I have buried 2 husbands. I survived Jim Crow. I survived a hip replacement. I survived my son dying in my arms. You think I am afraid of you? Preston stared at the tiny old woman with the frying pan. For a moment, the rage in his eyes flickered into something else. Confusion. Maybe shame. Sit down, Gloria commanded. Preston did not sit down, but he took a step back. That was enough. Ruth appeared behind Gloria, phone pressed to her ear. Preston, I have 911 on the line. Police are 4 minutes away. You have exactly 240 seconds to decide if you want to add breaking and entering to your list of federal charges. The 4 minutes felt like 4 hours. Preston stood in the hallway, breathing hard, fists clenching and unclenching, staring at Vivian through the bedroom door. She stared back, one hand on her belly, refusing to look away. The sirens came first. Then the lights, red and blue, strobing through the windows like a heartbeat. The police came through the front door, 2 officers, then 2 more. They found Preston in the hallway, exactly where he stood when Gloria told him to stop. He did not resist. The fight had gone out of him, replaced by something empty and defeated. As they cuffed him and led him down the stairs, he turned his head one last time. This is not over, Vivian. I will take everything. I will take the baby. You will never be free of me. The door closed. The sirens faded. The house went quiet. Vivian slid down the headboard until she was sitting on the bed, her knees drawn up as far as her belly would allow. Her whole body was shaking. Ruth wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Gloria sat on the edge of the bed and placed one weathered hand on Vivian's knee. It is okay, baby. He cannot hurt you anymore. Vivian's voice came out in a whisper. What if he is right? What if I made him into this? Gloria was quiet for a moment. Then she squeezed Vivian's knee and spoke with the authority of a woman who had lived long enough to know the difference between a hard truth and a convenient lie. Vivian Marie, a woman does not make a man cruel. A cruel man just waits until he is comfortable enough to show it. You did not create the monster, baby. You just gave it a nicer cage. If someone you love ever shows up like that, drunk, angry, threatening, do not try to reason with them. Do not try to calm them down. You call for help and you get behind a locked door. Your safety is not negotiable. Not for love, not for history, not for anyone. 3 months later, on a warm morning in April, Vivian Sinclair gave birth to a 7-pound, 4-ounce baby girl in a hospital in Dayton, Ohio. She named her Eleanor Ruth Carter Sinclair. Eleanor for Eleanor Roosevelt because Vivian wanted her daughter to carry the name of a woman who turned pain into power. Ruth for the friend who stayed when everyone else was just watching. Gloria was in the delivery room, which was not technically allowed, but Gloria had simply walked in and sat down, and nobody on the hospital staff had the courage or the desire to ask a 78-year-old grandmother with a walking cane to leave. Ruth held Vivian's hand through the whole thing. At one point, during a particularly intense contraction, Vivian squeezed so hard that Ruth yelped and said, "I need that hand for my job, Viv. I am a nurse. I use needles." When Eleanor arrived, screaming and furious and beautiful, Gloria cried. Ruth cried. Vivian cried. Even Benedict, watching via video call from London at 2 in the morning, his time, removed his glasses and dabbed his eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "She is perfect, madam," Benedict said. "Absolutely perfect." "Of course she is," Gloria sniffed, holding the baby with the practiced ease of a woman who had been holding babies for longer than most people had been alive. "She is a Sinclair." The weeks that followed were the quietest of Vivian's life. She was staying at Gloria's house in Dayton, the same house where her father grew up, the same porch where Henry used to sit on summer evenings and whittle animals out of wood for Vivian when she was small. The dogwood trees were blooming. The yard smelled like fresh-cut grass and the beginning of things. Eleanor slept in a bassinet next to Vivian's bed, making the small, contented sounds that newborns make when they feel safe, which is the only sound in the world that can make a woman who has been through hell believe that everything might actually be okay. Ruth came to visit on a Saturday in May. She brought diapers, a casserole, and a bottle of sparkling cider because, as she said, "We still have not properly toasted." They sat on Gloria's porch. Eleanor was asleep on Vivian's away chest, her tiny fist curled around a strand of her mother's hair. The afternoon light was golden and warm, the kind of light that makes even ordinary things look like paintings. "So?" Ruth said, pouring cider into two mismatched glasses from Gloria's cupboard. "Give me the updates. I want the full rundown." Vivian took a sip. "Preston was sentenced last month. 8 years federal prison. No parole eligibility for 5. His lawyer tried to negotiate, but after the break-in, the judge was not sympathetic. The bail violation added another 18 months. Good, Ruth said. Tiffany had her baby. A boy. She named him James. She took a plea deal. 6 months probation, 200 hours of community service. She moved back to her parents' house in Virginia. Ruth raised an eyebrow. "And how do you feel about that?" Vivian was quiet for a moment, watching a robin hop across Gloria's lawn. "I set up a trust fund for her son. Anonymous. He will have enough for college and a start in life." Ruth stared at her. "You are kidding. That child did not choose his parents, Ruth. He did not ask for any of this. He deserves a chance to be something other than a consequence." Ruth shook her head slowly. "You are a better person than I am, Vivian Sinclair." "No," Vivian said. "I am a mother, and I know what it is like to grow up without enough people in your corner." "What about the company? The public stuff?" Carter Ventures was dissolved. All assets returned to Aurora. Benedict handled the unwinding. The name Carter has been removed from everything. Vivian paused, and the public narrative shifted after The Atlantic ran a long-form profile. The journalist, to her credit, talked to Dr. Patterson, my obstetrician. She talked to Ruth. She talked to the neighbors who heard Preston yelling at me through the walls. She talked to the waitresses at the restaurant who watched me come to work with red eyes for 2 years. The article was not about a billionaire getting revenge. It was about a woman surviving abuse, and people finally saw the full picture. There is something nobody tells you about justice. It does not feel the way you think it will. Vivian had spent months planning the gala, imagining the moment of revelation, the satisfaction of watching Preston's world collapse. And there was satisfaction. She would not lie about that. Watching the mask fall from his face, watching the room see him for what he truly was, that was real and it was powerful. But it did not heal anything. The satisfaction faded within hours, replaced by exhaustion and grief and the complicated, ugly work of rebuilding a life that had been built on a lie. What healed was this. Sitting on a porch in Ohio with her best friend and her grandmother and her daughter, listening to the birds, feeling the sun, being known fully and completely by people who loved her, regardless of whether she was a billionaire, or a waitress, or a woman in a faded gray sweater. Gloria came out onto the porch carrying a tray with 3 glasses of sweet tea and a plate of cookies. She moved slowly these days. The cane was always close, but her eyes were sharp and her tongue was sharper. Are you two going to sit here moping all day? Or are you going to help me eat these cookies before I eat them all myself and blame it on the dog? We do not have a dog, Grandma. Then I will blame it on Eleanor. She cannot talk yet. She will not argue. They laughed. It was the kind of laughter that comes from a place beyond amusement. The laughter of women who have earned the right to find things funny again. Gloria took Eleanor from Vivian's chest and settled into the rocker with the baby, cradled against her shoulder. She looked down at the tiny face, so new, so unmarked by the world's cruelty. Your daddy would have loved this little girl, Gloria said softly. I know, Vivian said. I just wish I had not wasted 5 years, Grandma. 5 years on a man who never existed. Gloria rocked slowly. Baby, those 5 years gave you Eleanor. And they gave you something else, proof that you can survive anything. You walked through fire and came out holding a baby. That is not waste. That is a miracle. Ruth raised her cider glass. Also, you are literally a billionaire with a newborn and a killer wardrobe. Your life is not a tragedy, Viv. It is a comeback story. 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, Vivian stood on a small stage in a community center in Dayton, Ohio. It was not the Archdale Hotel. There were no chandeliers, no marble floors, no $5,000 plates of food. The chairs were plastic. The sound system kept buzzing. Someone had taped a hand-lettered banner to the wall that read, "Welcome to the Sinclair Foundation." The room was filled with women, not socialites, not CEOs, real women, mothers, survivors, women who had left with nothing, women who were still figuring out how to leave, women who had been told they were worthless so many times they started to believe it. Eleanor was in Ruth's arms in the front row, chewing on a stuffed elephant's ear with the focused intensity of a person performing important work. Gloria sat in her wheelchair beside them, wearing her Sunday hat and an expression of fierce, uncontainable pride. Vivian was not wearing the midnight blue gown. She was not wearing the Sinclair blue sapphire. She was wearing a simple black dress and her father's old watch, cleaned up and polished, its second hand ticking steadily against her wrist. She looked out at the room. She took a breath. I am not here as the Aurora Group. I am not here as a billionaire. I am here as a woman who stayed too long with a man who treated her like she was invisible. She paused. The room was utterly silent. I had resources most people do not have. I had money. I had lawyers. I had a security team. I had a grandmother with a cast iron skillet. Laughter. Warm, genuine, knowing laughter. And it was still the hardest thing I have ever done to walk away. Not because I did not have the means. Because I did not have the belief. I did not believe I deserved better. He had spent 5 years convincing me that I was small, and I had started to believe him. She looked at Ruth. Ruth nodded. So I cannot imagine how hard it is for those of you who are fighting this battle without those resources. Without the money, without the lawyers, without the safety net. And that is why this foundation exists. Vivian outlined the programs: free legal aid, emergency housing, job training, childcare, counseling, a 24-hour hotline staffed by people who understood because they had been there. This foundation exists to make sure that walking away does not mean walking into nothing. It means walking into a future, your future, and you deserve one. The room erupted. Not the polished applause of 500 socialites at the Archdale. This was something rawer, louder, realer, the sound of women who had been in the dark for a long time and were finally being told that the door was open. Vivian stepped off the stage. Eleanor saw her and reached out with both arms, the way babies do when they see the person who means safety. Vivian scooped her up and kissed her forehead. Eleanor grabbed a fistful of her mother's hair and held on. Gloria wheeled up beside them. "Baby girl, your daddy would be so proud of you today." "I hope so, Grandma. I know so. Now take me to the car. I am tired, and these cookies they served are stale." "We are stopping at the bakery on the way home." Vivian laughed. Her phone buzzed, a text from Benedict in London. "Paris acquisition finalized. Board sends congratulations. Also, your grandmother called me this morning and asked me to bring her British tea biscuits when I visit next month. She specified the ones with chocolate. Shall I comply?" Vivian smiled and typed back, "Comply immediately. Do not disappoint her. She has a skillet." She carried Eleanor out of the community center and into the October sunlight. The air smelled like fallen leaves and the beginning of something new. Ruth walked beside her. Gloria rolled along behind them, critiquing the landscaping. That is the story of how Vivian Sinclair built an empire, lost herself inside a lie, survived the cruelest kind of betrayal, and found her way back to who she always was. Not a billionaire, not a housewife, not a victim, or a villain, or a queen, just a woman, a mother, a daughter, a friend, a woman who finally believed she deserved better. And she was right. If this story hits home for you or someone you love, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, but it helps this story reach another woman who might need to hear it tonight. Drop a comment below and tell me, was Vivian right to expose him at the gala? Or should she have just walked away quietly? I genuinely want to hear your verdict. And if you are new here, subscribe and tap that bell so you never miss another story of drama, betrayal, and justice served exactly the way it should be. Now let us begin. Closing statement. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful storytelling with real-life lessons. Every character, every scene, and every twist was crafted with purpose, to entertain, to inspire, and to remind you that no one deserves to be treated as less than they are. Thank you for watching until the end. We will see you in the next story.